Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived an old pauper in a small hut just outside the village way. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't talk, didn't utter a sound. No one saw him, except at night when no one was around. He would plant mushrooms out in the woods for the fairies so that they could relax and take a break from their day. So the fairies would bless him and the rest of the village with good luck, and the king as well, the prince, and all the land. But one day, the old pauper fell ill, and he was unable to go out into the woods. And so the fairies no longer had mushrooms on which to sit when they were tired after their long days of visiting children to grant mothers' wishes. So, sadly, over time, the pauper died, and the kingdom grew ill. And there was an oil spill offshore, and everyone in the kingdom, for it was a fishing village, lost their great fortune. And they had a really bad economy. So many people left. But one boy, just Jack, stayed back because his mother was ill and on bed rest, and she was going through hospice. So Jack decided to be her nurse. Home health care, you know. And so, like all good grandsons, he took care of his grandmother. And one night, there comes into the village a young little lass speaking in the fondling tongue of the fairies. So young, so sweet, dancing on her feet, but she had no mushrooms on which to sit. And so she was tired and fell faint. And just Jack saw her in the street, and he gave her the night to lay in his bed and get well. And the fairy was so grateful to Jack that she gave him a bell. And this bell, she said, would grant 3 wishes. Each wish would be granted for him. So the first wish that Jack wished was that his grandmother would get better. And one day, a doctor came into the village, and he spoke with Jack's grandmother and found out that she had a tumor on her brain. And he did surgery, and it was operable, which means that he could treat it. So he took the tumor out, and Grandma was okay. So Jack went on his way, leaving the kingdom. And he went to the bay of Galingam. And there the people had quite a troublesome time with the trolls, for they could not pay the tolls because the economy was so bad after the oil spill. So Jack rang the bell, and soon they found gold aplenty that pirates had left in a well. And so Jack traveled the world. He went to China and Japan. He went to meet a wizard named Stan. And Stan had no hands. But he worked in a band, and he played guitar. I didn't know that playing guitar could be that hard. But Stan, he knew, because he had no hands. And like all wizards without hands, he couldn't do magic anymore. So Jack, feeling bad for the man, rang his little bell, and the fairy came and gave the wizard Stan his hands. And so he could play guitar much better. But it was cool for a while having robot hands. They just get tiring because they get sore in the knuckles. and nobody wants hands that are sore in the knuckles. So the wizard Stan said, "I will grant you one wish, young man." And Just Jack replied, "I would like a wife." And the wizard Stan waved his hands, so new and bright and clean, and he said, "You will marry the most beautiful woman in the land." And as it turned out, that woman was Alizé. And Alizé had been praying in the temple so grand to meet a young man, for her father had brought all these suitors, including the prince from the land of the oil spill. And so the prince from the land of the oil spill was the one who was promised. But she did not want to marry him because he was a misogynist, which means that he did not like women because he was mean and just hurtful, and he had some issues, some real bad issues. So Jack took a sword and a pen, and he knighted himself by tapping himself with the sword on his head. And then he wrote with the pen a full-out document stating that princesses could not marry misogynist men. And so the bad prince went away, and the world was happy that day. And the two got married, the princess and Jack. And they lived in an ice castle up in New Zealand. It had a really good air conditioning system. It was top of the line. You know, they used really good. They used sub-zero, absolute zero refrigeration techniques. They had particle physicists who worked on it. Yeah. And the particle physicists were like, you know, they were high class. They were theoretical. They knew all about cosmology and the world and the universe and everything and God. Yeah. So anyways, in their ice castle, they had a boy. And this young little boy who ran around in the mud, making mud pies for his little monkey spies that he sent throughout the land. This little boy, they named him Stan, after wizard Stan, who had no hands, but now had hands, and once had robot hands. And so this little boy named Stan, who made mud pies and had monkey spies, and lived in the ice castle, grew up and grew old. And that was how the world got the new president of the United States of America. And his name was Stan. And he built lots of ice castles, and everybody got ice cream, and the whole world was happy and bright and blue. And there were free-range chickens that ran about the land amok. And everyone now had good luck because he planted this Stan. He planted mushrooms in all the woods in the land. And the fairies finally had somewhere to sit. Because it's really good to be considerate.